Hello and welcome to TALRadio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. And it's my pleasure to welcome Andy Tallents along with me on TALRadio today. You're listening and watching to a wonderful series called Self-Coaching, and we have the self-coaching expert in the house once again with us. Andy, welcome to TALRadio.
Hi, Sandy. It's lovely to be here again.
Thanks a ton. So today we would be talking about developing a coaching culture, its benefits and its implementation. So let's start from the scratch. How does one define a coaching culture within an organization?
So you will know whether you're in an organization that has a coaching culture by understanding what's going on around you. So I'll just describe what it feels like and what it looks like, and then you'll know if you're in one now, listening to this. So it will feel spacious and not hurried. It will feel as though you're listened to as an employee, no matter where you actually are in the organization. It will feel as though you're respected like an adult, as opposed to necessarily being parent and child. It will feel as though there's clear direction in the company. It will feel as though you have a role to play in that and understand that role very clearly. And it feels as though people talk to each other because they want to understand what's important to the other person. So a coaching culture, and this doesn't exist in many places in my experience in organizations, just feels like a place where you can make a difference in the way you want to show up, in the things you want to do, and being held accountable in terms of the things that need to be achieved. So it feels like a very grown-up place to be.
It's like a well-behaved place, I would say.
Yes.
Awesome. So moving on, what really differentiates a coaching culture from traditional leadership style, or you can say management kind of approaches?
Yeah, and there are differences in the West and the East, but generally a lot of organizations tend to have this top-down structure where supposedly the chief executive, the leadership team, the board, whoever it is, know best. They set the direction. They make all the decisions. They tell people what to do. And there's nothing wrong with those things. And that's a traditional structure. The problem with that is it tends to lead to short-term success, but it means we're not harnessing all of the people and all of the knowledge and skills they have in the organization because we're telling them what to do. We're assuming we know best as a leadership team. So what we've learned over the last 20 years or so is if we can change that environment where the leadership team says, we don't know all the answers, we've got an idea about the direction, we think actually you've got a role to play in shaping that and we want to listen to you and help you develop in your own way of doing it, differentiates the traditional cultures to coaching cultures. And it's very rare, particularly in the West now, to find cultures that exist around coaching because the chief executives tend to be leaders who lead through authority and by telling people what to do. It's changing, particularly as more women come into organizations as CEOs. It's starting to change.
And I'm sure you're a part of that big change that's happening.
Yeah.
Lovely. Wonderful to know that. So when we talk about the coaching culture, so what are the biggest benefits an organization sees, when they embrace coaching culture kind of a style?
So I'll give you an example. Let's say there's an employee working in an organization where they have a customer issue to deal with. If I'm working in an environment which is traditional, a management structure, the likelihood is if it gets really complex in terms of that particular problem with a customer, I'm not going to feel as though I've got the responsibility to solve it because I'm always used to asking upwards about what I should do because I've been used to giving direction. If I'm working in a coaching culture, as the employee, I'm empowered to actually understand what the problem is with the customer and use my own judgment and experience to try and solve the problem with them, not worrying about what the people above me are going to say because they built trust with me and given me the space and authority and responsibility to behave like an adult and do my best to sort the problem out. So the benefits of coaching culture generally across the whole organization is individual employees taking responsibility for their actions and their decisions, knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, knowing that I can feed back to the leadership team about what works and what doesn't. And overall, it improves engagement across the organization, it improves effectiveness, improves productivity, and more importantly, it improves the way that people feel about their own well-being because they're leading themselves. We've talked a bit about this in previous episodes. So they're the benefits, and over time, it leads to improved profitability in the organization, as opposed to leading from what will improve profits, tell everyone what to do, and over the long term, people leaving and becoming disenfranchised from the organization. So there are many proven benefits to a coaching culture.
So technically, while you were narrating all this, all I could think of, it's kind of a rippling effect that it has in the organization. So talking about employee engagement, and you say that, and you just mentioned that it actually increases within coaching culture. So how does coaching culture technically, improves employees' engagement, performance, and the biggest of all, retention?
So if we think about what happens in a coaching culture, there's this thing about accountability. So if I give you lots of space to make decisions, but I'm very clear with you about what the consequences are of you not fulfilling your obligations to that, it's a very adult to adult relationship. What it means is that you actually take more responsibility. So for that, it means that I actually want to understand more about what my boss's objectives are. I want to understand what the customer requirements are because I have responsibility. And therefore, I become more engaged in the process of delivering that, as opposed to me being told what to do. And I say, well, that's not going to work. You told me that last time. I become disengaged. Okay. And we all have been in those kinds of environments, and we can all relate to this. So that's one aspect in terms of the actual processes. It also means that if I'm actually listening more, because that's what happens in a coaching culture, to everybody around me, it feels more engagement between us all because we're understanding each other and we've got more buy-in to each other. You can use the analogy of a sporting team where they're being coached properly and they understand exactly what their roles are. So it leads to that. And then finally, in terms of the productivity side, what it means to the organization is if I'm really clear about where my responsibilities are and where the line is drawn in terms of where mine stop, it means we're being more efficient in terms of what we're doing each day and makes us more productive in the long term. So it's linked to well-being. It's very clear. It's very hard to create these cultures, but we see it every day in certain organizations where people just feel more involved, more ownership, and they come to work because they want to, not just because they're being paid to.
When you said that they want to come to work because they want to and not because they are being paid to, it literally seems like, a paradise, a worker's paradise, I would say. Lovely. So moving on, can you share an example of how coaching has really transformed a team or an organization? I mean, if you want, you can name the organization, and otherwise, we can always, keep our mouths zipped about it.
Yeah, no, I was working with a company who are working in the travel industry. So they arrange organized trips for school children. That's what they do. And so they provide transport and the actual holidays. And because they were owned by an ownership company that were very focused on short-term profits, the way that they worked as a leadership team and the whole business was very much short-term, operational, very much focused on the here and now and getting things done. And as a consequence, the relationships within the organization, not as good as they could be because they didn't spend time in them. So I worked with the chief executive and the team to start working on how can we become better at improving our relationships in the organization rather than just doing, because what that will do is create better engagement, and what that will do is improve understanding, will improve accountability and responsibility because we're better in relationship, which will lead to better profits because we end up doing the right things as opposed to just everyone doing things. So that was a project. We did it on an individual basis and a team basis, so the individual CEO and also the team, getting together and learning how each other worked and how we could be different with each other. So over a 6-month period, that worked. The only reason it worked is because they created space and time away from the day-to-day activity, which was really hard for them. You can imagine that feeling of we're only really good because we work so hard working on the business each day. And they spent days at a time where they were actually learning how to be with each other and how to have this kind of coaching culture in the organization. Now, it wasn't easy. And they had to teach all of the people in the organization how to listen properly, how to engage properly, how to take responsibility. And over a period of about a year, they actually worked through this process to become much more like a coaching culture. And what that benefits organizations is it actually enables them to be profitable in the long term as well as the short term. And that was the difference.
Lovely. Very happy to know about that. Well, moving on, what are the first steps, that leaders should really take if they want to start building a coaching culture within their organization? I mean, because if the leader does it, everybody would follow it.
Yeah, so there's some clever things that leaders need to think about here. So the first thing is, which is an obvious one, but not every leader does, is they need to demonstrate they believe fully in coaching to begin with, as opposed to just saying we're going to create a coaching culture and they don't engage in it themselves. So many CEOs say, well, I don't need a coach, Andrew. I'm fine because I'm really good at what I do. But if they're not living it and breathing it and actually receiving coaching themselves, how can they expect other people to do it? So that's the first thing. Recognize the CEO, the leader, has to engage in coaching themselves. Then the best thing to do after that is to look at a part of the organization that's doing okay, maybe doing quite well, where you can see there's potential for it to improve even more. And use that as a bit of a pilot project to start bringing in some of the concepts around a coaching culture, where you within the team start to get them to listen more effectively, engage with each other more effectively, take responsibility, and just use it as a pilot. And over 6 months, see what happens in the performance of that particular business unit or that pilot project in terms of moving from where they are now in performance to where they get to over 6 months. Coaching them, supporting them, removing obstacles, teaching them, educating them, checking in with them, always making sure that they're learning all the time, and then take the results from that pilot project into the wider organization as a case study to say, look, if we did this in other parts of the organization, this is what we can achieve. And this is what lots of our clients do. So for any leader that's listening, I would say engage with self first and then put in a pilot project where you can actually see the results and demonstrate it to the whole organization.
And that was about the leaders, but what about the people at the mid-senior level or at the junior level, who've never been through the coaching culture, but suddenly are introduced to it? So are there any kind of tools or kind of a framework that they can follow in the daily routine or their work life that can really help them accommodate the new kind of culture that they are, introduced to?
Yeah, this is a great point to talk about my book. So those that have listened to this, I wrote a book in 21 called Self-Coaching for Leaders. And it's for anybody in any organization really who's prepared to lead themselves, hence the leaders piece. And the key tools that come out of that really are the way that we manage our boss or our peers in terms of asking for permission to have space and time to really do this kind of stuff. Working out what our priorities are as individuals. So we're really understanding about what's important to us to do rather than all the things that we can do or should do or are nice to do, and being really clear about that. And the other thing is to actually really engage with our team members and the people around us just to work out the things we enjoy doing, the things we have energy for doing, the things we don't have energy for doing. And as a team, start to work out what are the things that we can do differently going forward. So it's all about self-leadership and taking responsibility for that whilst making sure you've got permission from your line manager, from your boss, that you're okay to do these things. Because what we don't want to happen is for you to do these things and suddenly people are telling you, well, hold on, you're not performing and you need to be spending time doing this. So there's lots of different techniques which people can read about in the book, but they're the main ones to be able to start leading self differently. And it's hard because we need to change behaviors.
True. It's really hard, and change behavior is one of the toughest things in anyone's life.
Yeah.
How do you really think that, organizations can ensure consistency and sustainability in their coaching initiative? Like they've taken an initiative, but then it needs to sustain.
Sure. So this is all about engagement again. So let's say that the coaching culture project has started, and let's say there's a pilot starting to happen and then it's getting out wide in the organization. The way that these work are to make sure that everybody's fully trained and understands exactly what the project is about and how it's going to benefit them as individuals. It's about having regular touch points. So sometimes we can use what are called 360 engagement tools or pulse surveys, where we're getting a sense on a weekly basis about how people are feeling about the changes that are being introduced and how it's making a difference. Getting feedback from everybody about what's not working, what things are getting in the way, what things they're struggling with, and to feed that back into a loop about how to improve that going forward, constantly engaging. Usually organizations put together workshops where they have either town halls or online meetings where, again, they're just imparting knowledge from the feedback about how people can improve what they're doing on a daily basis. So engagement's really important. Role modeling, which we talked about before, where the leadership team is actually living and breathing this as opposed to just expecting the rest of the organization to do it. And finally, it's about making sure that when they start to see quick wins in the organization from these changes happening, they report them quickly to everybody in the company, say, look, if we do this and you engage in this, these are things that happen which actually improve the way you work, improve your relationships, improve your well-being, and improve profitability. And having those easy wins communicated very quickly is very important.
Winds of change, I must say. But then winds of change are not accepted so easily, either in a personal life or in a professional life. There are people who are very skeptical about it, not just employees, but leaders also. So when it comes to coaching culture, like, how does one really get rid of this feeling that, oh, is it really going to work?
Yeah, this is all about psychological safety, really. So how safe does it feel for me to communicate that to someone about the way I'm feeling? So if I'm resisting something and I'm not sure about it, or I don't trust it, or I've seen these projects before and they've never worked, I need to feel safe enough to be able to communicate that to a sponsor or a line manager so I can let them be aware of some of my fears, some of my anxieties. Because if I share those, it does three things. The first thing is getting off our chest, if you like, getting it out in the open makes us feel better because we've shared it with somebody. A problem shared is a problem halved, as they say. The second thing is it's usually great insight for the line manager to understand what's going on. It's not normally just one person that feels like that. It's a number of people. So they recognize there's an issue here that needs to be addressed. So it raises awareness about the problem for the wider leadership team as well. And the third thing is it means that once it's out in the open, it means there can be some kind of collaboration around a solution so that person feels less resistant to the change. Because it might be that you work out that it needs to happen a little bit slower. It needs to maybe have a different process or a system involved to make it work. It might be that the individual feels they don't have the time to do it, and therefore there's a way of creating more time around that. So the key thing is share, make sure there's a combined solution from line manager and the individual. And again, just test it and see what works and have that courage, if you like, to do something different. But it's very hard if we don't feel supported by our line managers.
So on that note, I would really like to know, are there any metrics to measure, once coaching culture is introduced in an organization, like a certain metric that can say, oh, yes, this is really working for us?
Yeah, there are three things that normally happen with an organization to measure, because if you're introducing this, there is an investment you need to make. Obviously, it's employing coaches and training people. So the first is it's finding a key performance indicator within a business that's important. So let's say it's about customer response levels, simply an organization. So we knew what they were before the coaching started, and we can start to measure how they're improving post the coaching culture being created. So that's one measure which many organizations do. It's not just about profitability. It's about the key performance indicators which enable the business to be profitable. Sometimes that can be response times in terms of service levels around product being delivered, whatever it might be. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which we've already talked about, is there is usually a significant increase in terms of the way that people feel engaged. And there are so many surveys out there now for organizations which are employee engagement surveys. So asking people, how do they feel about coming to work each day? How do they feel about their boss? How do they feel about being around their team? We can measure that before the coaching culture comes in. We can measure it during and post and after. And then the third measure is an interesting one around really just about what it means for the individuals within an organization and how they feel just about themselves when they come to work. So we can do that through many apps around mental well-being. That might be an app which measures your mood that day. It might be about how it measures your level of engagement around your work. So there are many measures like that, which again, we can measure on a pulse basis. So it's really difficult for an organization to put a figure on in terms of return on investment, in terms of money. What we can do is measure some of the outputs and the outcomes that become part of that coaching culture.
To my next question, something that I always love asking is all about the technology. And you never disappoint our audience on this. So talking about technology, what role does technology like digital coaching platforms or AI today, what role do they really play in scaling coaching practices?
Yeah, so this has really advanced just really in the last 2 years. So there are organizations out there already that allow you as an employee in an organization to access a coach, a human being, live when you want it, online, any point in time, on demand. You just need to book it in. And that's happening right now. So technology is enabling that through video technology. That's not always cost effective because it's still a human being that's providing that coaching. So going back to your point, the next iteration is AI coaching. I now work with organizations where they're employing AI coaches who, in workflow, in the moment, where a coaching culture is being created, where people are taught to think for themselves and own their own outcomes, where you can go into an interface where the AI coach will say, hello, Sandy, how are you today? And it will actually engage with you to understand your problem and coach you through some various alternative scenarios about how you might manage that situation. This is live now. It's very, very cost effective in the way it works, and it allows you to scale very quickly. Now, it doesn't replace a human coach. It never will in that sense. But what it does do is provide a lot of the answers that people need just to feel reassured that they may be doing the right thing. And it's almost like, in a hospital type service or medical, it's like a triage service. It's something we try first to try and solve the problem. If that doesn't work, let's go to a live human coach. So AI coaching is helping with that. And the third one, which AI is really helping with, is having a knowledge depository. So if I am not sure of what the answer is to a particular question, I can ask an AI coach to coach me through it, but actually it might be quicker for me just to put in, I need access to this information now. Where does it exist in the organization? And we know how difficult it is to get technology to provide answers for us. And for us to get those answers, this is very common in medical practice and hospital environments now, where there's already somebody that knows the answer that you are posing the question for. So it's having access to live information as well as AI coaches. So this is all now democratizing coaching, accelerating coaching cultures, because in theory, for as little as maybe $20 a month per person, somebody can get access to an AI coach now. And for that kind of investment, it makes such a difference in embedding coaching cultures, because it's all about the practice of every day and workflow that enables success of coaching cultures to be embedded.
Well, okay, on a personal note, I would really like to know, Andrew, you just mentioned about, you have an AI coach available at $20 per month as a phase. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, there are amazing, coaches like you. Do you somehow feel let down sometimes? What is this happening to this beautiful culture that we are a part of?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. I think it's complementary. So let's say, which is true, that 80%, 90% of an organization's workforce would not normally get access to a human coach because it's quite an expensive resource. Okay. So if we flip that and say, well, if we could get 80 or 90% of the workforce to access something that's close to a coach, it's not perfect, why not give them the AI coach? Because it's better than nothing. And then what we can do is start to work out patterns of, if I'm working with an AI coach and then there's one problem that I come up with every single time that the AI coach can't help me with, that's when I can go and engage with a human coach, because it's adding more value to me about the problems I'm facing. And they're normally about things in relationships. That's normally what a human coach can really help with. So I don't see human coaches being removed. What I think the focus changes for a human coach is about where we focus. It's not about basic questions. It's not about solving basic problems. It's about how we solve relationship problems. And that's where human coaches can really add value. And that's where a lot of my work is focused and where I get so much joy from.
Lovely. So thanks a lot for the deep analysis and giving us such amazing insights about, developing a coaching culture within an organization, the benefits of it, and why should somebody implement it. Well, if our listeners want to reach out to you, then what is the best way to do that?
They can just go straight to my website, andrewtallents.com, Tallents, or they can go to LinkedIn and type in Andrew Tallents. There's only one Andrew Tallents on LinkedIn. And there you'll find lots of resources, lots of material around this subject. And yeah, just be curious. Read about coaching cultures. There's lots of documentaries and collateral out there about how you can get payback on your investment. And if you're not doing it now, it means you're losing out to the competition that are.
Well, it's now or never. On that wonderful note, I'm going to wrap up this wonderful segment of self-coaching series. We'll be back with another episode, another interesting episode. Till then, please take very good care of yourself and have a great day ahead.